Otherwise, I have neck wrinkles. I didn't know this would happen to me when I turned 40, but here we are.
Secrets of the
On that
aging
note, hi
process.
everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
So welcome to the latest episode of the Lodgge Debriefs. This is going to be a show based on deep dives on industry events. So today we're going to be talking about the big one, Game Developers Conference, GDC 2022. We're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and basically everything in between. So I'm joined today by three wonderful guests, but I'll let them tell you a little bit more about themselves. Miriam, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. My name is Miriam. I am the CEO of a game development company called Bloom Digital Media. We have two games that are out. One is called Long Story. It's a dating sim set in a middle school that helps teach kids about consent, identity, being in love, who they are. And the other one is called Later Daters that teaches the same lessons to senior citizens, but also talks a bit about how life is long and kind of helps people who might be feeling a little bit like, at 25, they've seen it and done it all, to sort of maybe expand the lens a bit. So it's more of like an existential meditation about love and relationships. We are working on well, that's not the one we were selling at GDC.
We'll get more into that one. But Jay,
Yeah.
why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
I'm the co-founder of Idiom with my wife and I. We've been around for just a couple of years now as this particular entity. And we're working on a cooking horror game called Mother's Little Helper. It's one of these odd little things that you make as a throwaway idea over a year ago, and it went kind of silly viral and gave us a lot of attention and lots of people going, I want to know more. So now we're making it. It's going
Awesome.
well.
Robert, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Starfort Games. We're a 8-person game studio in Ottawa. We've been around for about 2.5 years, doing a bunch of contract work, and now we're trying to raise money to make our own game, Star Envoy, which is like a 4X game in the style of like Masters of Orion, but on mobile.
All right, so the whole point of the show is to kind of give viewers behind the scenes on some of the major industry events, right? There's a ton of events every single year taking place across North America, taking place across the world. And we wanted to offer a little bit of insight to either people that are new to the industry or maybe some smaller studios that are really trying to get the best bang for their buck. So to start off with the obvious, what is GDC? Robert, can you give us just a brief breakdown on what the event itself is?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, GDC, I believe, is the biggest B2B conference in the games industry. So this is where everyone goes to meet other game developers and to learn more about game development. So there's a talk side where people go in and there's tons of talks. Usually all the best talks are at GDC. They kind of pick the best talks from all the other conferences and put it there. And then, of course, there's a great expo floor with all kinds of vendors selling their services to game developers. And then, basically, pretty much everyone is there. So it's your opportunity to go and meet with other studios and that you've been trying to get in contact with because they're all there trying to do business.
Well said. Well said. So all of you were part of one of the Canadian missions to GDC this year. Why was it important for you and your studio to attend this year as opposed to maybe last year or next year? What was so important about this year in particular? Jay, if you want to kick it off for us.
I mean, the interesting thing for us is we've been attending a lot of the conferences online, and they've all blended together into a big mush. It's the same people at every one now. I've talked to them over and over. They don't need to talk to me again. And there's just something about that in-person experience that is incredibly valuable, because really any business conversation, which games and stuff is establishing trust with one another, and that's so much easier to do when you're in person. You get an instant read off the other person, and just the ability to do that. But it also establishes that level of kind of seriousness of the company simply by being there. It is a big financial investment. It is a lot of time to spend, and I'm basically putting a flag in the sand, being like, yes, I am part of this industry. I'm legitimate. This are the things I'm doing, and just your presence does that at something this large. Whereas if you're doing kind of smaller events, it's just as valuable in many ways, but it doesn't have that instantaneous level of gravitas to the whole thing. So it's really useful and quite worth it, honestly.
I think you see that too with a lot of people, even like there's so many events that people go to, but this is the one that everybody changes their Twitter handle for at GDC, right? It's like it's everywhere, and you're like, oh, I know you're there, I know you're there, because you're right, it does kind of bring that sense of like legitimacy. You see a lot of studios talking about that. It's like I have to be there, like it's something important for me to be seen there, not even just what we're doing there. It's the fact that we went. Robert, what about you? Why was this year the year for GDC?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of similar to what Jay was saying. Like, I thought it was, we've been pitching Star Envoy. We started pitching towards the end of last year, and it's always been virtual. And, we're seeing a lot of the same people and everything like that. But with GDC now, it was in person. It's the biggest one. It's like the most legitimate one. And so a lot of the meetings you're trying to get was just with some of the same people we talked with before, and just like meet them in person and really try and show that we're real, we're serious, and kind of close the deal, right? And we also, because it's GDC, everyone was there. So we were also looking for new opportunities, but a big part of it was just reestablishing or making that physical connection with existing opportunities.
Did that make it feel like the virtual networking was worth it? Where it's like you may not have got a lot out of that, but when you actually met them in person, it kind of broke down a barrier.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It was great.
Miriam, what about you? I know you've been at GDC before. What was it about this year that you knew you had to be there?
I'm gonna be the person who comes out on the opposite side. I don't think we should have been there. I don't think we had to be there.
All right.
I think strategically speaking, it might have been, I'm not going to call it a mistake, but I think GDC this year it didn't hit for us in the same way.
Felt like an unnecessary risk?
It felt
maybe not that verbiage, but
it felt like there was a lot more people going, we're at GDC, but no GDC. Like there's a lot of at GDC, but not at GDC. So there was a lot of para event stuff happening. And since we invested in a booth, we were sort of stuck at our booth and sort of like taking the temperature. I was like, oh shit, nobody's going to go to this expo hall. They all didn't buy passes. And so I feel like that's something that GDC is going to struggle with for the next little while, because I think the experience of GDC remains important. I'm not sure if the conference of GDC and the passes and what they're offering, I mean, I'm just being 100% honest. Like most publishers,
why we're doing this. Now this is to promote GDC. That's what we want.
Most publishers had hotel rooms, right? And we had a 4-player game. And so my strategy was like, well, with a 4-player game, it's really hard to demo a 4-player game in a hotel room. So I was like, well, I guess we'll just have to invest in a booth and then we'll make our meetings on the show floor. And so we had a great booth set up with 4 computers, and we honestly, PlayStation was going to come, and then he was like, sorry, I can't leave the hotel, so we'll have to do this after GDC. Yeah, and so that's I'm like, why did I spend the money? Okay, next time we will email you a game build and save $5,000, because otherwise I would have brought a single computer to the hotel room and been like, imagine this is with 4 people, if you will. Which I think, this is I'm learning about 4-player games, and I'm learning that this is part of the challenge of getting a 4-player game published. So I'm not saying, oh man, this was totally a waste, but it's just, I think we aren't going to do another event until we're ready to show the game to players, because I don't think that you pitch a 4-player game at an event like GDC at a booth. You do it some other way.
I was wondering about
I spent a remarkable amount of time not at the event. Yeah. I don't think any of the meaningful connections I made were at the event. The expo floor was a lot of people trying to pitch me NFTs and having to convince them very forcefully to leave me alone.
Yeah.
That's coming up. That's a conversation.
And let's talk about the brand hurt of not being an NFT person and being on that floor and being like, we have a legit thing. We want you to look at it. I promise.
We will get there. We will get there.
I was wondering about the booths, because to me, if you're doing the B2B meeting, having a booth as a game developer didn't seem like a good strategy, especially this year. As you say, the expo floor was pretty dead, right? If you were selling a product, I kind of got it. But I was wondering, if in past years that was a good strategy, because this year it didn't seem paying off anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's never been a good strategy, and I just didn't know. It could be that this is how GDC has always worked, and somebody's gonna be like, "Oh, Miriam, you're so naive. You never go and get a booth if you're trying to sell a game." But it just seemed to me like well, we're trying to sell a game. Like, put all your money into the selling of the game.
Yeah.
But I mean, just like, yeah, as pointed out, the expo floor just also lacked a lot of the energy that it's had in the past.
So for those who maybe have never experienced GDC, what part they're actually looking forward to meeting like publishers and investors and things like that, and that's why they went. Can you talk us a little bit through of your process leading up to GDC? Did it involve like a lot of outreach that you were trying to set up meetings? Did you have to sharpen up your pitch deck? And does GDC themselves, do they actually help with any of those things? Or do you kind of feel like you're on an island by yourself and you're sending emails and cold calling, trying to set things up before you get on the plane?
I mean, I think that's, to me, is like I think I'm less of a nascent developer, but also I don't know if like business is my strength, let's say. I think it is in a way, but I find the pitching part the hardest. And yeah, I'd say like the way it should be done is you're supposed to have the emails of all the people you want to talk to and send them very nice emails a little bit early. I mean, I would love to hear from Robert and Jay about what kind of emails they're sending and how long they spend sort of spiffing up their email and word before they get there to make it sound just the right amount of like, hey, it'd be cool if we could get together. No press, but also like, yes, press.
100%. I actively listen to a couple of guys who give advice on those kind of things because it's like socially those things drive me nuts writing those kind of emails. I find you put your ask first. This is what I want from you, and then you can put in the little bits of niceties that
See,
everyone
we're
wants.
opposites because I always put like, "Hi, this is me. I found your studio.
Yeah.
This is what I like about your studio. This is
It's
what I
just
want from
from
you."
like reading when I'm sending out those things, I send out emails to a lot of people, and Dara and I were both doing that leading up for weeks leading up to the event, and that was mostly the payoff of doing these tons and tons of online things was, oh, I can actually like connect in a more meaningful way with these people that I've been sending back and forth and seeing little bits and pieces. I don't actually think I actually ended up seeing that many people in person through those meetings. Everyone was online. And most of those online things were then pushed the week after GDC. So we're still doing meetings because everyone's schedules, when like the number of people I knew who actually got COVID while they were at the event and then just couldn't be around because it wasn't. It still exists. So yeah. it was still a problem. A few booths I knew had to shut down halfway through the week and stuff. So
that was one thing I wanted to mention as well, is that like we want to make evergreen content essentially. So let's say someone next year is thinking about going to GDC. Yeah. I really hope that this conversation becomes redundant at that point. But when it comes to just setting up for GDC and the meetings themselves, all of that prep work would probably still be the same, right? Did you find that since there were so many publishers that were virtual, that it was easier to set up these meetings because you weren't trying to constantly like go in and out of a meeting room with somebody? Or did you think that it was just as difficult?
Lots of companies are pretty like online most of the time anyway, so they're pretty decent. And so because they have the meet to match system and a few other systems that everyone else ignores, that you can kind of connect with people through, and lots of it's nice because it lets you kind of reschedule and reject, but actually like continue conversation while you're rearranging those things. But there are always those few people who just like, they don't like doing it. Or I literally talked to a publisher who was like, I have 300 emails and I don't want to reject all of them, so I'm just not going to reply to them. And
wow.
So, the fact that I was able to say, hey, let's actually talk meant I was one of the few people who actually got to talk to that one particular guy. So like the strategy is try to do everything if you can. I always tend to stretch myself to my absolute limits for these things, which means I'm still very tired this week. But
thank you for taking the time to join us.
Off. Yeah, it definitely pays off because like we talk to many different people, and I think every single one we talk to is interested in continuing the conversation. And I think a lot of that is not just because we met at the event, but because we were prepping for the event. We were reaching out to them saying, hey, this is what we're going to be showing. This is what we're going to be talking about. Are you interested in that? So every conversation we had was already established as something that was interesting between the two of us, as opposed to, hey, can we meet and maybe talk about whether this is something you're interested in? So that kind of saves time.
Robert, what about you? Was it something, did you guys do a lot of prep and you felt like, okay, we hit all the things we needed to hit and we went and you felt like it really paid off? Or did it feel a little bit lackluster and it's like, okay, you know what, maybe next year GDC will be better for me because the show floor will be more packed or more people will be there in person?
Yeah, we did a ton of prep. So we did the Interactive Ontario pitching course, which was fabulous. I recommend it to everyone. It was
Appreciate that.
good. It really helped us refine our pitch. And then we talked to a lot of people, and we learned that we have to have 3 pitch decks. So we have a 1-pager that's for sending emails, which unfortunately for us was not ready until we were actually at GDC. So it didn't really come helpful. But next time we'll be really ready. Then we have our actual pitch for the floor, which was killer. Whenever I got an opportunity to do it, I blew it away, and that was because of the course. And then I had a follow-up one, which I'm using now, which is basically the same as one on the floor, but it has more details, it has more text written out, so we can read it and remember what we talked about at the conference and stuff like that. So that was our big prep. I think the one thing that I wish I did more of was I relied too much on Meet to Match. And so much of the conference was not in that system. So much was going around it. So I wish I'd put more emphasis on that 1-pager and use LinkedIn and just cold calling people and things like that. So they had more meetings, out and around the conference in those hotels, so that when I go down there, I would have just had more meetings. Because a lot of the people I needed to meet just weren't in Meet to Match, and ultimately I couldn't find them.
I think I should have probably said this off the top, but the thing that the 3 of you definitely have in common is that you went with a specific goal in mind. Right. You weren't trying to break into the industry or you went to network. You were going to pitch a game. So publishers, investors, all those things, 3 of you definitely have in common. And I can hear that being a little bit lackluster this year. But one of the big things that other people go for are the talks. Were there any that you were able to attend? Was there one that you really liked? Or was it much more of, we're here, we're pitching our game, and that's what we're doing. And then next time, if we're not pitching our game, maybe we'll get to see some more of these conversations.
The pass I got wouldn't let me into the talks.
Interesting.
Yeah. I paid extra for the Indie Summit, and then
nice.
I had a big list of talks I wanted to see, and then the only one I managed to see was Dave Proctor from the Big Con did an excellent failure report talk, and I
think there was 2 different people from Mighty L, and neither of them were virtual, so I didn't get to see either of them, and it really bothered me. I was looking forward to it.
I wanted to go see Saffron's, but we were busy trying to figure out how to set up our booth at that point, so I couldn't. But then, yeah, Dave's was fantastic, and so essentially I paid $300 to watch Dave Proctor talk, which is hopefully going to prove to be really worth it as I learn more and more from that talk. I'm just going to keep watching the YouTube over and over again, and I'll be like, there's another $10 when it comes out. No,
Jay,
it was lovely.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jay, did you see any talks by any chance?
No. I love the GDC talks. They're incredible generally, but I can always get access to those online, and I was paying to be there. And I do, if I was in more of a capacity looking for work or looking to network, that sort of thing, I would go to those talks, because you can go to the field that you're particularly interested in, meet people who are in kind of the same boat as you. But when you're essentially running a business, it's like the people with what I'm looking for are not there. So I will watch them, in the next following weeks, because you can get a digital pass to watch them afterwards.
Listen, yeah, as long as you like either the GDC fault, right? And the thing is too, is that I wanted to bring up that a lot of those talks, even if they were in person, they were still virtual, right? So like, I was curious to see if any of you had gone into a room with, let's say, 100 other people and a screen. And it's like, I feel like that would have been a little bit off-putting a couple times, of course, depending if people are in different parts of the world or whatever other like health reasons. But when it comes to, you go to GDC to be in person, that it must have been a little bit off to go and just kind of watch a Zoom call together. But for me, like, my experience was going virtually. So I actually was able to jump in a lot of these networking rooms. Some of them were all right, but it really does feel like that, where it's like, hey, I know who you are, you know who I am. So maybe one day when we do meet in person, it'll be a little bit easier to start this conversation and not have that awkwardness. But besides that, yeah, the talks themselves were fantastic, the ones I got to see. And yeah, the vault, I think, is incredible resource that everyone should try to get their hand.
Seriously, it's very good.
So one of the things I did want to say was talking about the show floor. So I actually heard from a couple of people that it was a little bit nicer in some aspects. They weren't going to pitch a game, to be fair, but because there was less people, right? So there was less of a crowd. There was less of that
That's
pushing
literally
shit.
never what a person who is paid to be on a show floor wants.
Exactly,
Like,
exactly.
oh, it was empty. It was really calming, and we loved it. And so good air, so much good air in there. None of the air was getting breathed by any of the other people that we wanted to have in there.
Well, was it that scarce? Like, I know, like, obviously,
Yeah.
I don't want to get too much into that because, again, we do want to say, like, in 2 years from now or next year's GDC, that won't be a problem, right? So, like, is that something that this year you're like, okay, wasn't the best thing for us, but next year it'll be worth it because the way they laid things out and some of the people that were there, some of the people we got to meet, or did it really feel like that it was like, no, there just weren't enough people? It wasn't worth us putting that resource.
I'm going to be 100% honest here. I think that GDC is, at this point, a lot of the time out for the money. And so the expo floor is where that happens the most. I think the talks that are organized and everything else is really lovely and great. But also I heard from a lot of people that even though they had an all access pass, if they didn't get to a talk 40 minutes before and line up, they weren't getting in. So they're selling a lot of tickets. They're not creating enough content so that every person who has bought an all access pass can find something interesting to see 10 minutes before the show's talk starts. So again, like if you're a business owner and you're like, oh, I really want to see this one talk, but I have publisher meetings lined up until 10 minutes before that one talk, you're not going to pay $1,400 for a pass if you know that you have to not book a meeting in order to get in line for your show. And the expo floor is the same. Like they have tiny booths, they have really big booths. We had a tiny booth, and like it felt like they had a meeting with us. They were like, book your meeting with the GDC staff to talk about your experience on the floor. And I sent Chris because I was like, I don't want to talk to them. And she went and she was like, all ready to be like, okay, here's the problem with our booth. Can you turn down the air conditioning? Could you perhaps do this? And they were just like, here's the map. Which one do you want to pay for next year? And she was like, none of them. Like, you haven't even asked me how our experience was this year. So,
also, don't worry about being negative, because like that was literally one of the main reasons why we wanted to do this, is because there are a lot of studios out there.
I mean, like it's just an interesting thing, because I think most of the other conferences, like I'm not gonna get mad at publishers for wanting to meet in the hotel room. They have a lot of work to do.
Oh yeah.
And probably their feet get pretty tired if they have to go around the expo hall for 3 days in a row. Like, I'm sure that they've maximized their time to provide the best experience for both the scouts and the game publishers or the game developers. But I will get mad at GDC because I feel like at this point, for the amount that they're charging for a booth, they should, PAX has a 10th floor that's devoted to indies. They like separate them out and go, okay, if you're looking for indies, here's where you go to look for them. They've created like experiences that allow people to understand the logic of the floor. And I think that's what GDC Play is supposed to be. But if that's the case, we were like steps away from an NFT salesperson and steps away from somebody selling virtual monitors that you leaned into. Like, there was no sense of like, there's no sense of like, here, this is where all the indies are. And there certainly didn't seem to be any sort of like onboarding for us since it was our first time. So I think that,
Go ahead, Jack.
I think the interesting thing, like just even as the expo floor is like, oh, I have a little bit of time, I'll go look. And there was the IGF area, which had a lot of attention on it, and they had the event for it after the fact. But anything outside of that little area was like, I go to a lot of conventions in Toronto, and they're far and away better organized and more interesting booth to booth and more themed, so you can find your way around stuff. And just as like an attendee, the floor is a mess. It's a total mess.
Was this your first GDC? I forgot to ask.
This is my first GDC. I hope it was just some sort of fluke, because this year was like particularly less attended. But like even the general thrust of it is, I'm developing games. Just from my perspective, I'm making games, and here's a bunch of people who think they can do parts of that better than I can and want to take my money.
Yes. They used to split that up. They used to have like a section for services. So if you wanted to run around and like figure out what Amazon's new game engine, they had a whole booth for cardboard one year that was really intense. And then there was the other section was like games that you could look at. And this time they seem to be like, here's a cool idea. Let's mix those all together. And I was like, why would you do that? Nobody is looking for those things at the same time.
So when it comes to maybe pitching a game, maybe GDC isn't the spot for it. But when it comes to
Oh,
I
no,
love
it's
it.
definitely the spot for it.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
don't get a booth.
So
Go to
go,
the
but don't
hotels
get a booth.
around.
Yeah, never get a booth.
I know many people who went and did buy tickets because
Yeah.
It's all about the
there.
event outside. I've
Yeah.
heard the same thing. Obviously, E3 is a lot different because it is much more B2C. But you hear that about like a lot of the bigger conferences. Smaller ones, people tend to go into and get a lot more value there. But these big ones, especially in these big cities, it's all the hotels and all the restaurants outside. Those are where the real conversations happen.
Well, and we haven't even mentioned the parties, which is like genuinely where I spent most of my time actually meeting people in a more organic way. That actually like was a lovely part of the event and really interesting. And even if it was like services people who weren't perfect for me, it was still an interesting interaction, and I've met some new people and stuff. But like even the parties, most of the ones I went to that were public were terrible, and the ones that I was invited to were wonderful and full of great people and like a really wonderful experience. And those things only happened because I was meeting with people as much as possible online beforehand.
Getting that invite to those exclusive parties is like the way to go. That's the best place to meet people. Like the public parties were no good. It was like the exclusive parties. That's where you meet people.
Yeah, and apparently full of disease. So.
And again, speaking again from, I feel like I'm like the GDC naysayer, but I also want to say that this was also this pandemic. Sorry for the specificity, but it would happen at any time. So anyway, this last year was the year I decided to not drink. And so I found GDC extraordinarily difficult, simply because I just don't have a tolerance for alcohol anymore, and I don't particularly enjoy it. And so I would have like 2 glasses of wine. I remember being out for drinks with somebody, and after 2 glasses of wine, I started going, "I'm really drunk," and I was like, "Oh my God, Miriam, thank God you're just out for drinks."
Yeah.
Like,
So yeah, maybe
but
that
I
at
was.
GDC might not the best idea when you're representing Bloom.
Well, yeah, luckily I was. Yeah, it was not a big.
Yeah.
It was a lovely person who I think was quite patient with me at that point. But but yeah,
I
found that weird. Like I found it.
I
weird
don't
that-
drink at all, and I found my new thing was introducing people to like virgin drinks.
I would come with you next time because I have no
'cause
idea how to
water
do
is
that, and I
extraordinarily
just
boring. And
was like-
you for bartenders, it turns out, really love a challenge.
Mm.
So you're like, I don't drink, make me something tasty, because I don't want to just sit here drinking water while everyone else is like being more entertained by their food. Lots
That's
of
pretty
virgin
neat.
mojitos and things. So they'd spread very quickly, because it turns out I think the tolerance en masse is probably a lot lower than they expect.
That's completely fair.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was one thing I did want to bring up. So you were talking about to stay on the negativity train, because apparently that's where we're going with this. NFTs.
Yeah.
That conversation doesn't need to happen here. But I'm curious I heard a lot about that on the show floor itself, right? And even a lot of the talks were dominated by that. So I'm just curious did you feel that you guys were being pressured even though you were pitching a game? Or did that kind of like take over? And what was the general feel from, I don't want to say normal game developers, but like your level of game development where I can't see 3 of you going in that direction?
It was interesting. They had all these really big booths down there. They had all this money to throw around. But for the most part, those booths were empty. I didn't see any developers wanting to talk to them. And actually, towards the end of the conference, I actually got ambushed by an NFT guy who came along with the publisher rep I was looking for, just to try, because he hadn't met any developers yet. And he really wanted to meet a developer and try and get a foot in the door. Like,
ambush is a strong word.
Really, it was totally an ambush. It was really strange. Like there was developers and there was NFT salesmen, and they were not connecting, and it was so strange.
Yeah. I'll be really honest about the NFT stuff, because I've actually even done a little bit of it to get more understanding of it, because it's such a big thing. And I have to explain to these guys who are just like, no, I like, seriously, just to be polite, like, I'm not interested in your sales pitch. I've got other things to see. And they'd be like, no, you don't understand. I'm like, no, you really don't want to hear my opinions on what you're doing. I'm being like, this is the best way forward, let me leave. And the general attitude, these guys are people who put a lot of money into these companies and don't have anything to sell it to. And they're desperate. Like, what it was like easily 70% of the show floor was just NFT companies, to the point where there was people selling like, we're NFT 2.0. Like, people are already sick of NFTs before it's become a thing. and it was a big financial push of people wanting to make money easily, and that always attracts people who maybe don't have their footing, and now they're suffering. And it's sad to watch, honestly, when you like, I know the general attitude on the floor of people with NFT stuff was like, oh god, it's more NFT people, and I definitely understand that, but it was a lot of people who are going to have to shut down shortly, and the general understanding amongst all of them, like, no one will talk to us, was pretty well understood.
Aaron, what about you?
It makes
Spending
sense.
all that time on the show floor.
Yeah, I didn't talk. They didn't come by my booth, but I guess
Really?
that's because, yeah, generally not. Like, I don't know. Like maybe they were like, oh, who are those? Maybe we just had a force field around us. There was an NFT guy right behind us, and I had some good talks with him because he was like right there. He's a big fan of music, but yeah, we didn't get accosted. I guess they didn't. Maybe it was because once you're in among thieves, you're not considered.
Yeah,
like,
once you have a booth, you're part of the
they're
trenches.
like, oh, you must be also NFTs. But I wanted to say, Jay, also, like at some point, please email me all of the ways you avoid drinking at public events, because
Yeah,
it
100%.
was way easier to do it at home, in my home. And then as soon as I got out there, I'd be like, oh, I guess just one glass of wine. And then I realized that's not how it works. Once you stop drinking, you
I actually
stop.
got a few people in the chat saying that's a great tip. Virgin drinks, that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're tasty.
But yeah, like for the NFTs, I mean, it reminds me, okay, like, so it's been a few years since I was at GDC because of this whole thing that we just went through. But I think the last time I went there, mobile ad tech was still very much a thing. And so it felt like the NFTs are sort of taking up that space, because they're used to, like, you know, there's been a lot more regulations put in the space. People understand the tech a lot more. People who work in mobile are fairly well versed now in how they're going to use advertising to fund their games. And so it doesn't feel like quite the free for all it used to be, but like there was a time where you'd go out on the show floor and be a bunch of people going like, hey, have you put ads in your game yet? Will you put ads in your game? You should definitely put ads in your game. Hey, consider putting ads in your game. Here, let me show you how easy it is to put ads in your game. You'll make tons of money from ads in your game. And you know, you were like, but if you are gonna what is the upside for you? And it feels like NFTs are kind of the same. It's like, you know, there's no magic bean, but people really want us to believe in the magic beans. And it's fascinating because I do feel like our game could benefit from blockchain, weirdly.
Yeah.
But getting an honest answer about like, could we use distributed licensing in this game about creative production that we're making? Like, there's no way to get that information at the moment. I think people are just really trying to sell this dream.
Within a few years, hopefully things will be a little more understood. It won't be that wild west that it is currently.
Yeah, I don't want gamers to mint things that they're going to sell for a lot of money somewhere else. Like, I don't care. I just want to be able to credit producers with work that they make in game, which is like a very different process. Like, attribution is fine. I don't mind attribution, but I don't think people are understanding the way a game person would use it. They're trying to see it the way a salesman would use it.
1000%. So one of the things I did want to ask, to bring it maybe on a more positive note, what was your favorite thing about GDC? That's probably the most general question I could possibly ask, but I thought that was something I wanted to hear from all three of you. That you went, you experienced it, however your experience was. What was the one thing that you really enjoyed when you came home to tell people? Jay, why don't we start with you?
Yerba Buena Park is such a nice little oasis amongst all that craziness. It's this park just north of the convention center, the Moscone, and it's got a little waterfall and lots of places to sit, and it is absolutely chock full of people all wanting to chill out from the experience of selling constantly. And I regularly just walked up to random people who I could tell were there for the event and just relaxing and said, hi, do you mind me sitting down and saying hello and meeting some people? And because genuinely, I'm in games because I love games and I love people who make games, and I like hearing and chatting about it and getting to talk to people from all over the world who are all just in this one little, very relaxing, no stress spot. It was a really nice thing to kind of run away to anytime things got crazy.
Or what about you? What did you enjoy the most?
I mean, I loved Yerba Buena Park as well, but I think my favorite thing actually was being part of the Canadian Mission. Like, they had a Discord where people were organizing all these little events, and I would go to those and just hang out with other people of the Canadian Mission. Like, we have such incredible like talent in this country, and just meeting those people and hanging out with those people was unbelievable experience. Yeah, it was better than any of the connections I've made at GDC. Pretty much, it was great.
Awesome. What about you, Miriam?
I think it was our first time showing this game, and the game is quite a departure for the company. And I think like we started building the prototype during the pandemic, so we didn't get a chance to test it in public very much. We did some remote tests and stuff like that, but it was really nice to see people trying it. I mean, was it worth $5,000? I don't know, but it was great to see them try it. It wasn't that nobody came to our booth, but and we got super good feedback. And so I think it was really nice to go, oh, this is a concept that, you know, for me felt like something pretty new for us, and to see it validated was great. And then also we had a couple of good lunches and breakfasts with people and dinners where it felt like we didn't do a ton of sort of like top level meeting with people we didn't know, but we connected with people that we knew from before.
Oh,
And it was really nice to see them again. And it was really nice to sometimes I'd be sending an email to somebody I hadn't seen for 2 years and be like, hey, are you around? Do you want to like meet up? And they'd be like, you know, like very quickly later be like, yes, when? So that was like nice. Because sometimes it can feel like, you know, you're here in your house for 2 hours, for 2 years going like, what's, you know, will there still be a community for me to come back to? And I do think the community is going to undergo some seismic shifts, not least because of this weird NFT thing. Like there was just so much more venture capital in the space of games right now. And every time that happens, it just gets weird.
Do you feel like that's like that ebbs and flows, or do you think that it's always kind of like that? But this year, just because of the scarcity of the show floor, that you just saw that much more than if you had that rest of that space filled with other indies and other studios that are all kind of doing something similar to you?
I feel like that's a bigger conversation. I mean, yes, I think that venture capital will come into games and stay there in a way that is weird. And it really just depends whether this whole thing about cryptocurrency becomes a real thing or if it fades out. I think a lot of developers' hesitance about cryptocurrencies and NFTs is because they don't want to see games become a space of speculation in that way. I mean, it's basically like a question: do you want the product you make to become a moneymaker? It's already already happens. It happens all the time now, but it's like the best kept secret of gaming that there's people in the third world that are mining products for other people and other game experiences, and we try not to think about it or talk about it. So now it's becoming like anybody can do that. You don't just have to be a poor person. Like you could be a rich person and do that for fun. It could be your child's hobby, and then you wouldn't have to give them an allowance. Like it's so weird. And I find that, you know, like back in the day, like one year I went to, we work on visual novels. So I remember having one year, like a conversation with somebody who was working on episodes, and they were like, episodes isn't a game. It's a platform where people create content and then we monetize that content and we make money off the content they make. And I was like, oh, I just make visual novels. Like I'm out of my depth. Like I never wanted to make a platform where we made money off other people's writing. I mean, that's like Wattpad. There's so many places where people's creativity is already monetized in games or in creative media production. And so I think the existence of VCs in this space now means they finally picked up on that. And that's a worry to me. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. I think it's great if you craft things in Steam workshops and sell them. I think it's amazing. Do I think it's amazing if that becomes like the whole way that games works? Not so sure. End of rant.
Yeah, Jay Roberts, do you have any comments before we move away from NFTs? Because that is not where I was hoping this conversation would go, but also knew that it was going to be inevitable based on the feedback that we've gotten about GDC. Last time to say your piece before NFTs banned from the rest of this conversation.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think honestly, it wasn't just a thing about NFTs. It was just overall, like even I went to the Unity booth, which just because I'm a Unity developer, it's nice to see what they're putting together with their engine and stuff. And even their booth, like I got to talk to the people who work there, which is always wonderful. But the thrust of the booth was not, here's the engine we're working in. The thrust of the booth was that kind of, look how much money our company is going to be making in the next few years because of these features we're doing. And like, that's not even remotely related to me using their product or even if those are the products that I'm using that they're talking about. The way the communication is happening is not in the game development space. They're there to say, hey, investors, come look at our stuff. And it really doesn't have much to do with the reality of what they're doing with that thing. And as a user of it, it doesn't have much reality in any way to it. So it's very disconnected.
That's such a good comment. Like, I had the same experience at the Unity booth. It was like really off-putting to go there. And then I did actually try and talk to some of the NFT people, and it was the same thing. They were like, I want to tell me more. Like, why should I use your thing? Why your blockchain versus other blockchain? And they weren't interested. It was just like, oh, we're the bee's knees, and we've got all this money. And I'm like, well, why do I want to talk to you? I don't understand. Like, will you give me some of that money if I don't have your blockchain? Like, I don't get this. Like, I don't understand. Why are you at GDC? What is your goal here? And I couldn't figure it out what they were trying to accomplish. It was really strange on most of those booths that I was talking to.
Miriam, I actually got a question from you in chat. Actually,
okay.
Your experience with the booth, you said wasn't your favorite thing and probably wasn't worth that investment, correct?
Absolutely.
Where do you think would that have been more beneficial from like other conferences that you've been to? Like, where can you see
to buy a booth?
Yeah, in your position of where you are at pitching your game, where do you see that of being quote unquote better spent on a normal year? Let's get away from
in a normal year. Yeah. Okay.
Hopefully.
I think that's a really interesting question because I think I did have a bit of cabin fever when I booked that booth, won't lie. I'd been in Canada for too long. And I was like, I have to go. I have to show people this game.
I did see that tweet, and people should check that out. Like, no regrets.
Let's
go. Yes.
No regrets. We're going. But I think it really depends where you're at in your game development cycle. So, number one, never announce a game at GDC. First rule. You can announce a game at something like PAX or something, one of the bigger conferences. Announce a game if you are actually ready to announce it. So like, don't just, we've badly announced every one of our games. So yay me. We have not announced this one yet. We were just showing it at GDC with no name. But announce when you're ready to announce. So like announce when you have like an actual solid plan for when production's going to take place. And like, I don't think you have to have a date, but you have to have at least like a rough estimate of like what year. If you're not ready to announce and you just want to show the game, which I think is totally fine, because it's great to get feedback on your early builds and to gather like interested players and to actually find out if your concept has legs. You definitely don't want to announce a game at a conference and then find out like it's something like PAX and then find out the concept is completely confusing to people. I'd say like go for smaller events. I mean, that's what we used to do. This was just like the first one where we went out on a limb.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I'd say. So if you're testing the game, small events. If you're ready to announce, big events, but the announcement should come at the time when the announcement should come. And I'm not a marketing expert, so I can't tell you when that is.
Jay, what about you? From the experiences you've had and the ones you've been to, what do you think maybe could have been better spent, or were you really happy with your experience and you're glad that you went?
I feel like we probably could have gotten by without being there in person, like as lovely as it was.
Even on a normal year, even without all of this?
Even on a normal year.
Okay, that's what I want to
like hear. Even a lot of the conversations, I was at Toronto Comic-Con. We had a table there, and we were just kind of showing our game off to see public response to it. And that informed a lot more of my discussion with publishers and things, just the kind of people who are interested in it, the kind of people who are walking up and really engaged with it, allowed us to talk about our market a lot more clearly than any amount of interaction I had in GDC. Because in the end, we're selling something to people, and showing it to people is how we're going to get that information. And I think that event was, a fifth of the cost for 3 days, where we were one of the only game developers, and thus became, oh, have you seen that game booth over there? And kind of word of mouth and all that stuff kind of travels. Smaller events are genuinely great for kind of just showing your things to areas you probably wouldn't have access to otherwise. The GDC event was really successful for us, but I don't think it's because it was GDC. And I think that's a shame that they can't really offer anything extra that the other ones aren't doing for such a storied place. Everyone knows that this is the place you go, this is where everyone's going. And despite that, it didn't really feel that special, which is really unfortunate. I think it has the capacity for it.
Robert, what about you? I know this is probably GDC was your first big one, right?
Or I've been to GDC. This is my second time at GDC. This is my first time as a business owner. But yeah, and I've done some other smaller events online, right? This is the first time I'm trying to sell pitch in person.
Especially out of Ottawa, you don't have a lot of these smaller events to go to in your backyard in Toronto,
No.
right? I'm working on it.
That's
Ottawa,
right.
working on it, trying my best.
Yeah, OIGC doesn't exist anymore, so we need another conference here. But yeah, I mean, for the mobile developers, so I don't think a booth would ever make sense for us. Like the way we interact with audiences is very different, right? But and then in terms of GDC, like I mean, for me it was interesting because everyone was there, right? But if I don't know if I even need a conference pass, like just as long as I have access to the Meet the Map system and I go there and I can go around to the hotels and do business people, I think that might be the better strategy in the future, right? So that's like the advantage is everyone's there and everyone's trying to do business, and that's why I would go there.
With GDC being like such a big deal, right? There's a lot of community missions. There's a lot of programs that are being set up so that studios and that talent and other people can go to these things. So people are going to be going regardless, right? What is one tip that you would give someone who's going to pitch a game, and one tip that you would give someone who is going to network and going to really get more ingrained in it? Jay, why don't we lead it off with you?
I need to think.
Robert, why don't we lead it off with you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going there, so the question is go to pitch a game, right?
If you're going to
First
pitch a
question?
game, what's one tip? And if you're going to network, what's one tip? Because we do have different people that go to GDC for different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, go to pitch a game. I would try and well, first of all, book your meetings 1 hour apart, because one thing I found running around is very hard. It's like a big physical area, especially since most conference is not happening at the center; it's happening around the center. So, well, I guess that's one tip right there. So just book things apart.
It's very smart. Yeah.
Sneak in a second one. I'll let you sneak in a second.
And then I think the other one is like, use Meet the Match, of course, but then try and use as many, like, come up with a big list of everyone you want to meet, and then go emails, LinkedIn, whatever you can to try and find all those people at that conference, because they're probably there, or like someone related to them is there. And so try and get to the meeting with them, right? That'll be the next thing. And then for actually pitching yourself as a student, I don't know what would work.
Even just talent. Doesn't have to be a student. Just someone that
talent
isn't going to represent a studio or represent a product. Say that.
Yeah, I mean, I would go and take in the talks for sure, but like I didn't see anyone come up to me or any other studios trying to like sell themselves as someone to come join. Like those people always seem to be at the talks, and that's a great place to be. You learn so much of those talks.
It feels very like separated, right? Where there's like a lot of people that are going to pitch, or there's a lot of people that are going to experience, and you hope that they overlap because you want the people experiencing to go to the people that are pitching. But it seems to be there's a little bit of separation when it comes to
there's a physical separation.
Yeah, I genuinely don't know where the talks were.
All week. They're completely different spots.
Crazy to me. Like, wouldn't it be like, oh man, that's so strange to me, because like, why wouldn't you want those two to talk to each other and cross each other's paths on a regular basis? If people are there to learn.
$1,000 difference.
Yeah, exactly. The ticket prices are different, and so they don't meet.
I think that the original GDC, like the way it was imagined, was meant to genuinely just be a place where, we all make games for a living. Let's all get together and like share information about how games get made because it's fun. And then that's the talks. And then it sort of like has evolved past that into something, I think, pretty unwieldy. I feel like they should probably have a meeting and get together and be like, how do we want to make this
So if it's
a
so
little bit
separated
less
like that,
unwieldy?
Yeah, it's completely separate.
if it's so separated like that, like, are you just pitching to other people that are pitching? Like, are you just like?
No, you're pitching to publishers, but they go to no talks.
Yeah.
Got it. So like, it's just directly to them. There's no outside. Okay, got it. I was just curious because I know obviously it's much more B2B, but still, if you have people that are talent that are there to see talks, the more eyeballs in your game, the better, right? So like, why
all the
wouldn't
people
those
pitching
two?
are too busy to pitch to each other?
I think that there's like ever so often, I feel like people make jokes. Like when I went to see Dave's talk, I was like, I'm out of prison. like if you get to go see a talk, if you borrow somebody's card or whatever, and you go into a talk, it can, if you're the person who's there to make business deals, you can sort of feel like, oh, well, that was really fun. That was like my one fun thing that I got to do this day.
Yeah.
Presumably the people who are lining up to go to talks would be like, oh my gosh, I got in on the ground floor getting to watch a pitch. Like they might learn a lot. I would imagine actually what would be an ideal would be that somebody who was a game development student who is there to like figure out their career might really benefit from actually getting to sit in as a silent fly on the wall, watching like studios actually pitching their games. That will never happen, but it would be like being a resident doctor, right? Like you're watching somebody perform a complex surgery and you're like, oh, look at how they're doing that. That'd be really interesting. But I can't imagine GDC facilitating that as a learning experience, because I think that they don't fully understand what they're running anymore. Like,
You
I'm
know-
sure that they're like, people go to hotels. We don't control that.
When I talk about how the Canadian mission was one of my favorite parts, that was one of the things I really loved about it, was we were all swapping tips on how, like, we're all there to pitch, and we were all swapping tips on how to do it. And I learned a lot from them. Maybe they learned a bit from me, right? Like, it was just great on how, like, oh, this works, so this doesn't work, or
I
here's how you
literally
do a
did a
gameplay
sit-down
video.
lesson
It was
with
awesome.
another person. I met someone on the floor. I was like, here's my pitch. I'll walk you through half an hour. Let's go. Here's all the things you should know. And the Canadian mission was what facilitated that, because he was like, I don't know if our pitch is landing. Can you give me some advice? I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
That's neat.
That is cool. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, my advice is to do whatever Jay does.
Oh, okay.
But I also had a thought, which is that if you're there to network,
Yeah.
as opposed to pitching, I do find, I think, like, it's the same as if you go out for a night at a party or something. If you bring a friend, you're going to hang out with your friend. So there can be like a big temptation to stick with your group. And I think a lot of people came by our booth that were like UX designers or narrative directors, and they were handing out business cards, and presumably it was to look for work. But I really admired their courage just getting out there and doing stuff. So I'd say if you're there to network, doing it by yourself is probably better on some days. If you can make that plunge into, like, just walking out and sitting next to somebody at Yerba Buena, I think that's a really smart idea.
Yeah. I think recognizing that it takes a lot of effort to do it. It was absolutely exhausting talking to people and being on that much. I'm very usually in my own space. I'm very happy with that. But talking to people constantly is exhausting. And if you are feeling yourself exhausted, don't continue. Stop. It's you're not showing the best side of yourself. You're not really affecting it. Go relax. Go find somewhere quiet. It'll help you a lot. Like, and just the power of, if you are actually energized and you have the capacity for it at that moment, like, cold calling kind of thing, even in person, is super powerful, because very few people have that capacity to walk up and be like, I don't know if this is going to go well, but hi, this is me. This is what I do. And everyone recognizes it just inherently, that it's a difficult thing to do. And even if they're very busy or, aren't quite the right person to talk to, almost anyone in games I've met who is a game developer, we're kind of in it. We're all doing it, and we have an inherent understanding that this is difficult. It's one of the very difficult job to, especially to break into. So if you take that courage to do that, you're going to get something, even if it's not like a job right away.
Yeah, that's what really benefits the in-person thing, right? Where it's like, cold calling through email or, Zoom calls, things like that is one thing, but it's like, I think meeting someone in person is just a really different experience.
I genuinely think email is just as powerful, and it's because it just works. People read their emails. It's the email feels
some people
like
do not read their emails. I am in communications.
I understand that. It's about, if you craft an email that says, this is what I want from you, this is what I can do for you, and this is why I like you or what you do. If you put thought into that and don't just send the same thing to everyone over and over, think about who you want to meet with, it's enormously effective. I haven't looked for work in years because I've built these relationships, and I'm in people's heads when they go, oh, I need someone who does that, who was someone I happened to have sent an email and chatted with someone about something. Keeping in touch with people is really difficult, but it means you're in the front of mind. And if you're looking to network, if you're looking to break into industry, you're not going to do it by just like waving your arms and saying, I do this stuff. You have to form those connections.
I was going to say, you have to have a rhythm. Like, you can't just wave it.
I guess one thing we've definitely learned today is the how strong networking can be, right? And like, maybe you don't have to fly across the country to go to GDC. You can go to things like XP is coming up in April, right? And that's for a lot of us, a lot of people listening to this are Ontario based. So it's, going to something like XP and being able to actually go person, if you're comfortable with that, or even experiencing it virtually, it's being able to build those connections is what's going to get you.
I will always give my favorite tip that my wife says, which is if someone says that you are allowed to contact them, keep contacting them. Even if they don't reply the first time, they gave you permission, they said they were open to it. Do it until they tell you to stop.
Oh, I was gonna say, I was gonna say that there can be a sense that the GDC is the only time to do these things.
Yeah.
But I think one thing I've had to learn over time, because it does not come natural to me, is that business development is a muscle. And so you have to keep exercising it, because if you don't, then you start to feel really, really shy about it. Whereas if I get into the headspace of being like, I can email, and it's good. I have a really good producer who I suppose is not my wife, but can sometimes definitely is not my wife. What am I talking about?
Yeah, you're like, you seem like
sure
hesitant
not
there,
my
and I was
wife.
like, are you?
Let me think on this for a
You
moment.
sure?
Secret wife.
But I can sometimes get into my own head a little bit and do these things of like, well, we just emailed them last week, or we emailed them a month ago and we haven't heard from them, so they've probably forgotten about us. And she's like, probably, but like, then you should email them.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's not like, it's not a popularity contest. It's just business. Like, they've got a lot on their plate, so go email them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm getting better at practicing my biz dev muscle when it's not GDC, in the hopes that when those events show up, I feel less weird about them.
Makes it a little bit.
One of the things from I learned for GDC is it's about making introductions, and it's not about necessarily closing deals, right? So it creates all those introductions, and now I have a bunch of people I have to email and stay in regular email contact with, right? So.
Awesome. That's definitely a plus there. I'm glad we're gonna slowly end on a positive note. Are there any final thoughts? Anything?
If you're a person who sends Christmas cards, then you will probably love business development. If you're a person who does not send business cards and often forgets birthdays, it's not good.
Scribble on your notes the business cards.
Oh.
Anytime you meet someone, write something about them. Write something about the conversation you had, just enough that you can remember.
That's great.
Such a good tip.
I have little notes on every single one of these that otherwise I might forget who they are.
Wow, I've never even thought about that. That's awesome. That's a good idea. But yeah, are there any other final thoughts or final tips from anyone, for anyone that is thinking of going to GDC, or maybe has been and didn't have the best experience? What's something that you think could benefit them? Your advice of going this, obviously this year being in.
I don't know. Go with like very few don't put too many expectations on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Go with like an open mind. I mean, even go like, if it's your very first time, go a couple of days early if you can. If you're young and you have lots of energy, to enjoy San Francisco and get used to the jet lag and be like full of vim and vigor by the time the first day rolls around.
Yeah, we didn't know we were going to go to GDC, and so we weren't prepared. We were scrambling to get prepared, right? Like, I think make that decision earlier, like maybe not right now, but like say January, and then prepare all your materials ahead of time, because doing it a month before it's really hard.
What about you? Final thoughts?
Overall, honestly, it was cool. I like conventions in general. This one is a big one, and I hope it continues to pivot as it exists and stays relevant, because it's such an opportunity for interesting things. Just the sheer fact that it has such cultural importance in the back of people's minds means you could do amazing things with it, and people attending can do amazing things with it. I met some people that mean a lot to me that I managed to meet them. I just as a total aside, managed to meet the husband and wife who created King's Quest back in the day.
I heard that they were around. You got to meet them?
That's true. That's awesome.
And like, that's just even seeing them in person as like, this is a person who actually made those things that was so important to me.
Yeah.
Real humans. I imagine that's probably a little bit more prevalent of a thing that exists when it's not a semi-virtual event. And that can be really meaningful, even if it's not like a huge business payoff in the end. It's, you are a human, you're here to experience life, and sometimes those things are extremely valuable. So keep that in mind.
I think that's a wonderful way to end this. So first, I just want to thank my guests, Miriam, Robert, Jay. Thank you guys for taking the time to come and talk to me and talk to a lot of other people that are maybe curious about GDC or maybe a little more hesitant the last couple of years, but are really thinking 2023 is going to be their year, maybe in their dev cycle or just for networking or to meet more people. So thank you, everybody. This has been another great episode of the Lodgge Debriefs. If you like this kind of content, please let us know. Check out the website, check us out on socials, or even right here in the Twitch chat. That also works for me. So thank you very, very much, everybody, and take care.